Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Leadership Lunch Chat with myself and Jen Wilson.
Hello.
We are here to talk about our observations from the week in the world of consulting and being in the profession and hearing everybody's stories and issues and so forth. So, one of the things we are going to start with today is the overabundance of communication, the emails, the messages coming from flying all over the place through Teams and Slack, and where is the source of truth? So I don't know, Jen, if you wanted to begin today with how you're feeling about this and what we're seeing around town.
Yeah, well, yes, I do. I'll start with just my own organization, my team, because I think this is sort of where you and I came to this idea was that we were experiencing it so much ourselves, but obviously within our CPA and consulting firm clients. We use email. I mean, we are an outrageous email company, and we have to tell people we screen new employees from like, how well do you manage email? How much can you take email? Because some people feel like email is like a evil plot perpetuated against them some way by the team, and they resent email, and they can't file it, they can't find it. If that person is applying and we say, let's discuss email, and they go into a big rant about it, we're like, uh-oh, they can't work here. Because my partner Tamara refers to it as her news feed or her slot machine. I mean, the volume is outrageous and relentless, not just internal emails, but client, vendor, all of it, just massive volume of email. And then we use Teams, Microsoft Teams. We were using it before the pandemic. We certainly got, deep into Teams in the pandemic. And now because of its integration or sort of sitting on top of SharePoint, we always use SharePoint as our internal file share. So we're, messaging each other in Teams. The teams all have threads, and so I have to check Teams and I have to check email if I'm looking for something. And of course, people tag me and all that stuff, but I just have multiple places I have to look for communications and clients using Teams. So I'm part of their teams, and so they might be messaging me there sometimes. And one of the weird parts is some people at the client might use Teams and some will use email.
Mm-hmm.
So I in order to work on the same project, I have to be using these multiple mediums. And then I am a perpetrator of communicating to people, my people, especially on social media platforms. If I'm out reading something, I will forward the post in LinkedIn, for instance, so they could get LinkedIn messages from me, which I'm sure they're like, give me a break. Just send me the link, come on. So that's probably irritating. And then we use text. But text, from an internal communications perspective, we call it a breakthrough communication. So we try to reserve it for like emergency purposes. And, so I try not to text people random stuff, and they don't text me either. So if I get a text from a team member, I know it's like, you better look at this right now, in the next few minutes. And so at least we have that rule. But otherwise, it's all, every communication vehicle possible as much as possible.
Yeah.
And that really makes overwhelm and maybe miscommunication. And we respond to multiple threads. Sometimes I will go out and respond to a Teams thread, and then I'll get into email and the same conversation's happening and I have to respond there too, because not everybody that's on the Teams thread is on the email. And, so anyway, I'm sure everybody's facing these same things. And the way to manage it is to slow down and set some rules and then start living by them, right?
Right. And that's, one of the things that I think so few people do is actually the rules of engagement, and allow each person to use the communication tool that they want to use rather than what is good for the organization, and that everybody's in one central place. Because what happens with these tools is that we end up getting more communication and more stress, more places to answer things. And sometimes it just feels like a tidal wave. So it's really important to say, you know, I just had this discussion with a firm yesterday. Is like, yeah, I have Teams set up, but then, they'll email me anyways. Well, then you've got to be the disciplinarian and say, I'll answer you on Teams. I'll take this on Teams, because if you don't have any kind of rules of engagement, then it's really not solving a problem. It's not solving an issue. And a lot of times we get emails that we're copied on or blind copied on or whatever, that in Teams, anyone in the channel, if you put it in the right channel or Slack, and you're defining what that conversation is, everyone can see it and you can keep up with it at your own pace rather than getting inundated with email. I am a huge proponent of Teams and Slack rather than email. Wherever you can clear out email is good. I can find, though, if I'm getting too many emails, then I start moving away from Slack, which is where I want to be, but I can't keep up with all the emails that are coming in. And then, so I have to then look at my responsibility in it and say, well, I haven't looked at Slack for a couple of days because I've just been inundated. And then now they're starting to email me. So,
Well, I
know that that's me. It's, so I think it's really important that we, understand our role and how we play with this, and make sure that we're not stressing more people out with it. And then additionally, just making sure that we don't have too many tools as well. So, I think it was really important when you said, text is for emergency, right? Like that's the only time I use text. But, and I will say, if like I'm not answering something, text me, because that just means I've got 5 other things going on and I didn't see the email or the Slack message. But I think there's a responsibility of everybody on response time. And this is where I definitely can struggle with it, because I do try to set boundaries between work and my personal life, as well as I give that to my staff, my team, anyone that I work with. Like I try to respect their boundaries. And the problem is when people in this new way of working and everybody's working at different hours, then communication comes to you maybe at times that you're not working. And then people expect a response and you're not working, or vice versa. So there is ownership in these communications of making sure like decisions aren't being made on the fly, or communication is not happening too close to a decision needing to be made.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're needing an answer right away when you're messaging someone at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And so that's where we all need to take responsibility and step back and prioritize and make sure we know who owns the decision and what is the appropriate amount of time to get a response, and not expect it right away.
Yeah. And, that's just using by when dates or due dates or whatever, and being more rigorous about that for sure. And realistic or practical.
Yeah.
There's some complicating factors, Amy. Our team, we really like Teams and would like to communicate there and like to put all our files there and do all our collaboration there. I travel, and you do too. We used to travel a lot more. I'm certainly traveling a decent amount these days as we're emerging slowly from this pandemic, and editing files on Teams across airplane Wi-Fi or other Wi-Fi, even with my, my VPN in place. It is performance is terrible, and so I have to download that stuff. I have to download files. I have to remember to go out to Teams and download files if I'm going to do, 4 or 5 hours of flying across 2 flights or whatever. And otherwise I get dead in the water. Whereas with email, Outlook, if they were attachments, I could access them and I could do the editing. And so that's kind of a complication, is that it's not very effective out there when I'm traveling. It just isn't. And so then all of a sudden I now am bouncing between mediums, even though you don't want to bounce between mediums. And the other complicating factor is clients that won't use certain of the mediums, and so if they all of a sudden they want to use this one or that one, and now we've got multiple platforms that we're having to deal with because that's their standards. And so being flexible with their standards, but also just trying to figure out, is this a workable solution here? And then if you're really doing collaboration with people, there are always files, and where do the files live, and who is managing them, and who's cleaning them out, and making it all functional.
Organized.
Yeah. Just making it functional. And we're Emily on our team, who Amy, she's the boss of teams, and nobody builds a channel or deletes a bunch of junk or anything like that without talking to Emily first, because she's the keeper and the holder of us having it make sense. And then she updates regularly our standards for use, and has to send them back out all the time, to a message to the team to say, go read the team standards, because we've had some new wrinkles appear. And so anyway, it's helpful to have a central, person. And the bigger your firm is, the more you will have to probably have people who own teams, not teams, the application. I am the keeper of this team for this client, or I am the keeper of this team for this department, or whatever, and making the protocol or rules for those individual teams. The bigger the firm is, the more individualized that will be. But anyway, if you don't have that, it's the wild, wild west out there.
And that's the same within Teams or Slack. I mean, I'm a Slack user. I'm Slack and Google. So I don't have too much trouble when I'm traveling using Google. There is a Google Drive stream where it's right on my desktop when I'm working, and then syncs up. So that doesn't seem to be as much of an issue. But I would say organizing your channels and making sure people don't keep creating channels. Like, there has to be an owner of how many channels you have and what those topics are and whether they're useful. Else there's just way too many channels to check, and things that are in those channels that don't have to do with that channel. So the whole point of it is searchability, seeing history. If you add someone to your team that wasn't a part of the history, that's easy for them to go back to seeing the old communication. And that, to me, is the real advantage of these tools, is that things aren't locked up in email. So like you said, if someone's not in a channel, invite them, make sure that they're there, part of the conversation, that they know that that's happening. And, just the efficiency with it. I think what happens a lot of times, what I hear, like I heard a firm say this yesterday, was like, they think of it as chat Teams or Slack, but it's so much more than chat. And like most applications, we put these things in place, and we don't necessarily take the training and get fully involved in what it can do. And maybe it isn't that everybody needs to take the training. Like you said, you've got a point person, that's Emily. She's taking the training, but then she's educating the team on tips she's learning and so forth, so that you're using the full breadth of what these tools have as far as collaboration versus just the surface of it. Then it becomes chat, and then it's like, whoa, why am I doing this versus email? And then I start using everything. So, this is the point of pause, right? Of like, here, when people talk about stress and burnout, we have to get into these specifics. And a lot of times it becomes these little things that we don't think are a big deal, running a company or running a business line or whatever you're doing. And when we start asking people and get into it, then we realize there's a bigger issue behind something that sounds so small or, communications that have gone out that aren't approved or things that you don't want said just because people were flying away with it because it was an easier way to communicate, but then the protocol wasn't followed. So I just think that as people are thinking about the tools that they have in their practices, looking for duplication, looking for rules of engagement, and getting the right training on these tools, even if it seems simple.
And giving people permission, like in all things, we're talking about communication tools and vehicles and channels, but this is kind of an all things. Giving them permission to say, hey, I think we're off track here, or I thought these were the rules of engagement. What's going on? Why? And that sounds simple until they're talking to more senior person, and that senior person is kind of gone rogue and doing something outside of the agreed upon protocols for communication.
Yeah, because they don't think it applies to them.
or frankly, they never read them. They don't know. They're whatever it is, whatever their rationale is for it. We have to sort of have the ability to call people on it. Emily and I recently were out looking for something on Teams and found a bunch of new teams that we didn't know were there. And somebody had a good idea and they went and implemented it, but we don't add a bunch of teams without checking with Emily first. And Emily went and, sent an email to that person who was technically superior or whatever and said, hey, just checking in, noticed some new teams, outside of our standards and protocol. And we can't snap at people who point that stuff out or give a bunch of excuses or reasons or anything. We need to say, oh gosh, yeah, I did that. Sorry. If you want to delete them or we need to move things, let me know and I won't do it anymore. And so, and that's always something for me as a senior leader in the business to try to be coachable and palms up, tell me what I'm not doing that I should be doing, or tell me what I'm doing that's screwing you up. If I'm on your projects or in your channels or, communicating in ways that don't work for you, go ahead and tell me. And as senior leaders in our businesses, we have to be super open to that feedback. And some people may be listening to this and thinking, we don't have time to set like policies for communication. That sounds like a lot of writing. I had a partner say that on a call this week when somebody else was saying, let's document some process here. And he said, that's a lot of writing. I don't think we should do that. And I was like, well, probably so. But, it could be just simple bullets, and you put it somewhere where everybody can access it. It could be updated later. But if it's not in writing or it's not like on video, I guess you could shoot a quick Loom video or a quick video on your, system and just say, here's the 6 rules, the most important rules, and make everybody watch it and whatever, put it, memorialize it. And then the rest of us need to submit to it. Mm-hmm. And this is leadership 101, like set expectations, put them in writing. Everybody hears them.
But what's so interesting to me always on this is like in an accountant's normal work, they do write things out. They do have process and procedure. But when it comes to running the business, they like don't want to put their hands on the keyboard. So it's an interesting thing of, like how do you take what you would expect from a client or to get from a client to do the same thing as a leader and a manager and what your staff would expect from you or your teammates and do what you normally do. Like it really isn't that different. It's just a different topic. Right.
Well, are we really talking about like work on the business or in it?
Yes.
At the end of the day, because it's not even writing the procedure. Right. It's like having the conversation. Right. I'm not going to schedule the half hour with the team's owner. Emily's got a bone to pick with me, but I'm not going to make time for the call, for her to straighten me out or for her to straighten us out, which is baloney. We have to make time. If we, I like to tell people that, sometimes, and this is awesome. I love that you raised it. We probably should have it as a whole subject. But, I know. I like to say though, that like internal stuff, a lot of times client service professionals think this is internal. I don't have time for it. I'm working on client things, external, right? market facing things. Well, guess what? Everything internal faces the market. Everything internal affects a client. Everything you know what I mean? It's all the same. And so when you don't handle the work on the business and you don't do this stuff, it hits the client. It does.
And it
And
hits the
so
staff
that'll
and
make time.
they're
That'll make time.
burnout. Yes. Yeah. So we will save that discussion. So always a pleasure
You too.
every week. And we will be having some on and off weeks the next month or so with holidays coming up. So we may not be as consistent every week, but we look forward to seeing you at our next leadership lunch chat.
Yes, and we'll post in social whether we're on hiatus. Expect us to be there if you don't see hiatus social media posts, but there will be some hit and miss here over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Yep. All
Yes.
right. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks.